Hi, I'm Damien and welcome to 1833. So last episode we got halfway through learning about the history of rum, so we'll conclude that this episode. But also we'll be tasting and reviewing a rum from Guadeloupe. So a quick recap. Rum was first given as a prescription in India a few thousand years ago, but rum as we know it today was invented by the slaves on the island of Nevis when they found out that molasses could be used to create alcohol. And in the 17th century, rum was a massive thing in New England and partly fueled the slave trade. Recap done. Actually, one second. Yes, so in the last episode, I had an abridged quote, and through my continued research, I think I found the full quote, so I'm just going to read it out, so bear with me. Now, it's attributed to a gentleman called Robert Lingon, and it goes as so. The chief foddling they make on this island is rum bullion, alias kill devil, and is made of sugar canes distilled, a hot, hellish, and terrible liquor. That's my best narration voice. Okay, so let's get back to the story, 17th century, and go. So, at this time now, the French actually started to ban their colonies from producing rum. Now, although I wasn't able to find it written anywhere, I would suspect that this came from some very powerful aristocrats in France, basically saying, hang on a minute, how is it you've got your colonies producing this rum stuff when we're making brandy in the motherland, and these things are direct competitors to each other? But remember, that was just a ban on producing rum. These colonies were still producing sugar. Now, if you remember from the last episode, New Englanders at this time were now producing their own rums. So this ban on French colonies making rum is actually a win-win for these New Englanders. Because if you imagine now, they have less competitors actually producing rum, but even better for them is that they now have more suppliers who have all this molasses that they need to get rid of. Now, this in turn became a bit of a problem for those English colonies in the Caribbean, because now their French counterparts were undercutting them when trying to supply molasses to New England. These British colonies were a bit of a good income generator for the British Empire at the time. And so when they complained to their motherland, the motherland had to find a way to restore a bit of balance. Now, it kind of makes sense, because look at it like this, right? You got the Brits had one colony who wanted to buy some raw products, but they were buying raw products from your competitor, France, your arch rivals, when they could be buying it from one of your other colonies. So they were like, they had to do it was just better to keep things in house, So they passed the Molasses Act of 1733. Now, in all fairness, this act was widely ignored, but it was an act where it was a tax that the government put on molasses imports that were imported from non-British colonies. Like I said, it was widely ignored, but it did make molasses smuggling, a bit of a lucrative business. Now, that's 1733. Let's fast forward to 1750 and something called the 7 Years' War. Now, it's not a war I knew much about, and to be honest with you, you don't need to know the real details of it, but it does play a small subplot in the history of rum. So, the things you need to know about the 7 Years' War. Firstly, it lasted 9 and not 7 years. Secondly, George Washington, yes, that same George Washington you're thinking about right now, he was a very small cast member in the very early stages of the war. The war was the world's first true world war. That's because it was fought by multiple nations in multiple locations, and it was super complicated. In fact, I'd say it was more complicated than Will and Jada's entanglement. So, in a sentence or two, I suppose, the war was fought in many theatres mainly mainly in Europe and Northern America. And the two main protagonists were Britain and France. Now, France lost the war, and as a result, had to scale back some of their adventures in the New World, and also as part of that, had to bid au revoir to Canada. Well, Britain won the war, but it came at a great cost. War taught the British Empire a couple of things. Firstly, that its colonies were unable to defend themselves. And secondly, that war is a very expensive business. Following the war, it had to find a way to recoup some of those costs from the war, but also its continued defense of its colonies in the New World. You remember that Molasses Act from 1733 that was widely ignored and wasn't really enforced? Well, in 1764, the British government passed the Sugar Act, and that gave the Molasses Act a real it was a new tax, and it really enforced that Molasses Act. Now, this is where things start to unravel. This is where things start to go wrong, because after that, the UK government passed a number of taxes and acts that had an impact in the Americas, and although some were repealed, what it ultimately did was just pee off the American citizens and led to the cry of no taxation without representation, because at this time, although the government were taxing America had no representation in the UK Parliament. Now, this culminated in the events of the Boston Tea Party and the American Revolution. In his 1789 inauguration, George Washington, yes, that same George Washington popping up again, insisted that he had a barrel of rum from Barbados. I keep telling you, rum is important stuff. All right, so throughout the years, the next 100 years or so, rum played a big cultural influence in the development of America. But restrictions on sugar imports and the development of whiskey in America really led to a slow demise in rum. So there you have it. That's the history of rum. It's good for you, and it fuels revolutions. And actually, there's another revolution it's fueled, and I'll talk about that in a different video at some point. But rum is everything for everyone. All right, so here's the rum covered. Let's get some rum tasting. Before I do, though, please, as per usual, please like, share, subscribe to the video. Okay, so today's rum, it's Cane Island Rum. First things first, Cane Island do not produce any rums. They are a brand under the Infinity Spirits umbrella. But like most of these new rum brands today, they work closely with distilleries to produce bottles. Now, they approach this in two ways. They have a single island blend and a single estate rum. A single island blend is when they use a combination of rums from different distilleries to produce a bottle. And a single estate rum is when they go to one estate, one distillery on an island and produce a bottle of rum there. Today's rum is a single estate rum from Guadeloupe that's been aged for 3 years. Now, the distillery in Guadeloupe is a distillery called Bonne Mère, and like traditional rums, this rum was first aged in American white oak casks before being transferred into French oak barrels. Fun fact, Guadeloupe isn't actually one island. There's actually a group of 8 islands where only 2 are inhabited, and is technically part of France, so therefore it's part of the EU, which means you can use the euro. Now, according to the websites, this is a traditional French style rum, which blends together a dryness and oakiness. But let's see for ourselves. It doesn't smell very strong, but definitely I can smell a bit of caramel and definitely get a hint of that oakiness that the website describes. You can't really see it on camera, but it does have some long legs, and I think that goes to the fact that it feels quite thick in the mouth, much thicker than a rum usually does. And you can kind of see that when you look at it. You can see that it's you can see it in the colour, but it is a beautiful colour. Now, if you don't know, legs are, when you move specifically, or rum, or wine, or whiskey, or whatever it is in a glass, and you see those streaks, those are what we call legs. It's a very strong rum with a woody aftertaste that lingers in the mouth much longer than I feel comfortable with. It is dry. I feel that I need a glass of water just to get that moisture back in my mouth. So there you have it, my review of Cane Island Guadeloupe single estate rum. But you guys want to know what I'm going to score it, right? Well, before I do, remember to check out some of the other videos on the channel. I've actually just recorded a video where I answer a question I'm asked all of the time, and that is, Damien, what's your favourite rum? So check it out. I explain what my favourite rum is. I explain why it's a complicated answer to the question. But back to this. It's a difficult one. If you remember the score, you have buy and keep, buy and enjoy, and the bother with it. And this is a difficult one to place. I'm not saying it's trash. I'm just saying it's not very good. And I suppose on a different day, if sun was shining, I might feel a little bit different. It's a gloomy day today. And so the way I feel today is that I feel that it's just and it's not even a strong score. It's one of those ones where if one of you messaged me and said, "Hey Dame, listen, I tasted that Guadeloupe rum, it was rubbish. Why didn't you score it? Nobody with it." I wouldn't argue with you. It's on a borderline. You could either fall in the body with it or just fall on But I'm gonna score it But yeah, that's my review of it. Cane Island Guadeloupe single estate. It's kind of meh.